Hey everyone, welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast. I'm Brian, co founder and CEO of Let's Talk. And today's conversation is one I'm genuinely been looking forward to. Well, here's the thing most companies have a DE&I story, but very few companies have a DE&I reality. They've got the careers page. The Pride Month posts are shining bright right now. It's June after all. However, do I need to say that times have changed? Candidates, employees, the market, they're all getting a lot better at telling the difference between a story and the reality. Today, I'm joined by Arsh Behal. Arsh is the manager of DE&I for Deloitte across South Asia. But honestly, that's just one line of a much bigger resume. He's also a communications and capacity building consultant, a trainer, a social impact leader, and he's been a vocal advocate for mental health, gender, and LGBTQIA plus rights for a long time. On top of all, he's a teacher, writer, coach, journalist, speaker, and an RJ. So, safe to say, this is someone who's thought about this stuff from a lot of different angles, not just the corporate one. Once again, we're going to get into the uncomfortable stuff, what performative actually looks like from the inside, what genuine inclusion really costs an organization, and why your employer brand can't just hide behind a nice graphic during Pride Month. So if you're in HR, talent acquisition, or employer branding, and you've ever quietly wondered, are we actually doing this or are we just looking like we're doing this? Then this episode is for you. Arsh, welcome to the Let's Talk podcast. Really glad to have you here.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. What a beautiful introduction. Nobody's introduced me like this in a very long time. Thank you, Brian. That's very generous of you.
Well, it's hard work. It was a bit a mouthful because I've been doing my research and I was like, oh my God, how do you wear so many hats? Anyway, usually I get straight into it, but today I'll go with broad. All right, Ash? You've been doing DE&I work inside a large global firm for a while now. From
Yes.
where you sit, how much does DE&I actually move the needle on employer brand, or is it mostly noise?
Well, Brian, that's a beautiful question. And I think I've had the privilege of being on both the sides, right? I had a career before DEI and I had a career after I joined DEI as well. And I think DEI is not just a slogan or a phrase that we use every day, right? It's a huge commitment. It's hard work. At the same time, I think it's a very conscious makeup of who you are as a person in the organization, what the organization stands for. And DI makes a huge difference, makes a mountain and a valley and an ocean of a difference. I think it makes a difference in terms of how people experience culture. But culture is not just about, putting a few posts a couple of times a year, representing what the company stands for. What we do at Deloitte is we consciously embody that culture every day. That's what DI has actually stood for when it comes to Deloitte South Asia. You can hear it from our employees. You can hear it across the board in terms of how the office environments feel. You can hear it, when people visit the office for a couple of hours from different member firms, from different other offices. And what do they experience in Deloitte India, Deloitte South Asia offices? I think it's a beautiful experience to have. So I think it moves the needle a great bit. I think it starts from intention, mainly. If you have the intention in the right place, I think it starts from there. Yes.
I agree. Let's just say, for the benefit of listeners, and I'm completely agreeing with you on the intent, but without intent, there is no purpose. What's an example where you've seen it directly affect whether someone joined or stayed and where you felt that the intent was right and then subsequent action happened? Are you able to share an example?
Yes, I have a lot of examples. One of the recent examples that I would like to share is we're going through Pride Month. A lot of things that we're doing innovatively and creatively for Pride Month as well. There was an employee who was actually feeling a little on the edge because they happen to be trans, right? And Deloitte has very, very affirmative guidelines, affirmative ground rules about how we deal with gender, how we deal with sexual variance, sexuality variance. They reached out to us, the DI team in Deloitte, expressing their concern. We have a mechanism in which we actually take these cases seriously. We follow up in a certain manner. There's a process that we follow. 2 weeks into the conversation, the person is extremely happy. The person is joyous. The person is feeling well supported. And at the same time, to a point that, they become advocate for others in the organization as well. So a very small example of how conscious placement of your intention, conscious placement of who you are in the organization can actually go a long way. I really like to say this to complete this response. I think we always talk about setting the tone for everybody in the organization, right? I really think the tone, is set on the top and it kind of percolates down. So it's top down usually. Our leadership is the biggest support that we have when it comes to DEI and inclusion in Deloitte India, Deloitte South Asia. Our CEO, Mr. Romal, the Chief Happiness Officer, Saraswati Kasturi Rangan, the executive sponsors that we have for our ERGs when it comes to inclusion, whether it's persons with disability, whether it's LGBTQI plus inclusion, are very, very vocal. They make sure that they're making themselves accessible to absolutely everybody in the organization to the best of their ability. So I think these things, when everybody understands, are genuine and it's not just performative, they really make a difference.
Great. I mean, this is fantastic. And I completely agree with you on one very important thing, which you mentioned, is that it boils from top down. I 100% resonate with it. I always say this that employer brand is an always on project, correct? It never stops. And so is DEI. DEI or DE&I is always on. But
Yes.
most organizations treat it like a campaign, something with a start date and an end date. So, which, everybody says that, oh, it's Pride Month. Let's start something on Pride Month on June
Yes.
1 and then end it on June 30th. And then on July 1st, everyone's forgotten, correct? What does it actually look like when it's embedded into a company? Show up as an employer day to day. What does DEI or DE&I look like?
Very rightly said, Brian. If it's performative, that word that we usually use in a context like this, if it's performative, it's very short lived. And like we know, today's employees, today's consumer, and I'm almost using that as a metaphor now, they've kind of become extremely smart. They're very smart. And people are very, very good at understanding that if the organization genuinely cares about you, or if the organization is only involved in a certain measure to kind of do a little bit of window dressing, to put it politely. So I think it shows up across the board in all fractions of engagement in the organization. So it will show how the decisions are made. It will show what the tonality of the conversation is at the topmost apex of the hierarchy. At the same time, it shows every day in offices, which means that, how people are engaging with them in the cafeteria, how people are meeting within the meeting rooms or having conversations. When client visitations happen, or if Deloitte represents the member firm in a different place, in a different geography, how do those conversations take place? If I have to go on the other side, how the promotions are decided and how people are considered, for one role or the other. I think DEI impacts everything across the board, and you understand that it's working well for your company when you have people come up and tell you joyously during forums, and when they come up and experience that, what, Deloitte is not just a place where I go for work. Deloitte is a place which is my second home. I feel extremely belonged in Deloitte, and I've never had to minimize myself when I come to work. That feeling of keeping yourself together during work in every possible way and bringing your best self to work, I think that's the most liberating feeling, and that's how I know that DEI is impacting all grounds and all possibilities.
Okay. Agree? You say bringing your best self. I say bring your whole self. And sometimes your whole self, it may not necessarily be the best self because we are humans and there is a good day and there's a bad day.
Yes.
And, it doesn't matter. That's how we are. But rightly said, I'm so glad that where you are and the initiatives that you bringing forth at the company, at the workplace that you're in, especially since it's Pride Month. I'd like to know more about what is it that you are doing. What's your take on how organizations should show up this month without it feeling performative? So I just wanted to understand what is it that it's about ticking boxes, or we really feeling that, and then maybe you could share some examples of what you are doing in your
Hmm.
workplace.
So, Brian, I think I'd like to answer this question a little differently. I think it's not about showing up during Pride Month and it's not about showing up during June. It's about showing up for the rest of the 11 months. When June concludes, right, what are you doing for the rest of the 11 months? I think that's the litmus test, if that's the word I can use. And I think we always proclaim this during our sessions, during our meetings, anything that we're doing internally in the organization, during Pride Month as well, we do for the rest of the year, that we are here to support you throughout. We are here to support you in all aspects of your journey, in all aspects of your experience in Deloitte. And it's not about numbers. It's not about an ERG. It's not about employee engagement. However, all of those things are, very positive benefits of something that we do in DI. And I think I'm sure every organization wants that for them. But I think, like I said in the very beginning of the conversation, if your intention is in the right place, you want to do the right thing, you consciously value people's well-being in the organization, it truly shows. And once your intention and your heart is in the right place, you articulate things differently. You have the insight and the foresight to look at an employee's experience in an organization. For example, just yesterday, we had a very candid conversation with our CEO, just out of nowhere. We just had a Pride Month event 2 days ago. It was a very, very successful event, the signature event that we held. And just yesterday, we had a very candid conversation with our CEO and also our Chief Happiness Officer, Saraswati Kasturi Rangan, where they wanted to just take an hour out of their schedule and connect with people from Deloitte, South Asia, letting them know that we're here. Okay? There was no prompt. There was no reason needed for it. There was no agenda for it. It's just that, constantly keeping that conversation growing about mental health, which is an extremely important aspect of workplace, and letting them know that we are here and we are listening. It's very, very important. So I feel that if you keep the momentum on for 11 months and not just in Pride Month just becomes automatically, like the most beautiful culmination of the efforts that you've had for 11 months. I really feel that.
And I've always said this, and I'm vocal about this fact that DEI does not only mean supporting the LGBTQI plus community. DE&I also means looking after the women workforce,
Yes.
looking after fathers. We've just had Father's Day, right? Are we looking after them? DE&I also means like the differently able, is there opportunity to support them? So it's not just about my DE&I initiatives are only going to be active in the month of June because it
Yes.
is the Pride month, and then the rest of the months, no one's really talking about it.
Yes.
And I cannot say this any more louder that DE&I is not just about the LGBTQIA plus community. It's
Yes.
about a whole bunch of other people.
Yes.
Be interesting to know what is it that you do for other communities or the other aspects outside of the LGBTQIA plus.
Thank you, Brian. And you're absolutely right. DEI is so much more than just LGBTQI plus inclusion, right? That's one aspect of DEI, or I would just say one component of DEI. I would say diversity, equity, and inclusion is a mindset. That's the way I can put it, right? It's something that you may not be born with. You may not necessarily have the exposure to when you're growing up. But there comes a moment in your life where you decide yourself that, you know what, I want to equip myself with this mindset. I want to adopt it. And I want to make sure that I'm living my life more consciously and a lot more sensitivity. We do a lot of work for persons with disability and neurodiversity. We have a separate ERG for them. It's called Uniquely United. Our ERG for LGBTQI plus inclusion is India Standout, which is actually standout as a name. So any country which is creating their own standout group puts their name in front of it. So there's a New Zealand standout, there's a Japan standout. So we have the India standout, which is for Deloitte South Asia. Apart from that, something that we've done, which we're really proud of, we actually have the reasonable accommodation policy, which means that if this person who's a person with disability, it could be a physical disability or an invisible disability, or let's just say they're neurodivergent or they have some kind of mental disability, which a lot of people cannot easily see, but it's present. So we have reasonable accommodation policy for them, which means that if you come to the organization, we will do everything that we can in our ability to make that experience comfortable for you, to give you everything that you need in the organization to optimize you and give you the tools to perform your best. So
Yeah.
whether it means that we need to change the screen colors for people whose eyes are very sensitive to different kinds of screen colors, and that's form of a certain disability, we will do that for you. If it means we have to create, different kinds of technology when it comes to Microsoft and have to make different screen readers accessible, we have that technology in place for you. If it means somebody is not very comfortable with the height of their table where the laptop is kept or their PC is kept, we have ergonomic tables so we can adjust according to your height. So many different examples like this that we do. We also have the second careers program, which we're trying to focus on right now, which means that people, irrespective of their gender, if they've taken a career break and have a desire to come back, we will help them. We will try to induct them back into the organization, give them a comfortable place of induction back into the organization. Because I think we believe in making sure that no potential is wasted. We want to make sure that our potential is optimally utilized. There are so many things that we also do from the veterans' point of view. We have a veterans program, people who've been in the defense forces, and for whatever reason, they're no longer serving in that capacity. If they can join our workforce and they can probably be a part of our workforce. It's still a nascent stage. We're still working for it, but the intention and thought is still there behind this program. So many things that we do. And we also have the equal opportunity policy, which is again focused on persons with disability and neurodiversity. That a lot of people think that persons with disability don't have a lot to offer. They couldn't be more wrong. They couldn't be more wrong.
Yes.
And I always say this that, you know what, it's always the person first and not the disability first. So you look at the person, you look at who they are, and then they happen to be somebody who's dealing with a disability, but they require an opportunity and consideration. So we believe in dignity and we believe in opportunity as well.
Well, I don't want to know, or maybe I want to know how busy is your everyday work if you're going to be covering all of these things. But no, I'm glad we have now addressed what diversity, equity, and inclusiveness really, really means, right? LGBTQIA plus is important, but it is only a component because there's so much more. And as you have gone ahead and explained all of that, I think for everybody who's listening, should probably ring some bells and say, makes
Yes.
sense. So, on that note, according to you, where does DE&I sit in the employer brand conversation? Because we're covering so much, right? So, is it a pillar or is it a foundation or is it something completely different?
I think DI is the soul, Brian. You know, I'm very inclined to say it's the foundation, which I do think it is. But I think most importantly, DI is the soul behind everything that you do in the organization, right? So I feel that kindness is extremely important in every organization. And our CEO, Mr. Romal Shetty, always says this. He never says it's KPI, which is key performance indicators. He says it's kindness, high performing individual, that's for B, and I stands for innovation. That's what he basically stands for. That's what KPI is. So I think DI is at the heart of kindness, DI is at the heart of compassion. And you cannot have a thriving organization full of happy people till the time, you know, you employ kindness. So I think DI is the soul of the organization. And I think it goes without saying it's the foundation. Yes, it starts from there.
And I also think that it is the foundation and it's really, really important. But to add a soul to it, it takes it to a whole different level. If you're saying it's the foundation, why do so many companies build the rest of the house first and then both DE and I on after, like an afterthought?
So, you know, Brian, I think it depends on what level of maturity, awareness, and journey are you on, you know, when you're trying to
Personally, you think?
personally
Individually
as well.
or
And I think also, absolutely, I think personally for sure, that's the first way to look at it. Definitely personally. But I think at the same time, I would like to say people are catching up now, right? The DI conversation is extremely important right now, especially because, you know, an average employer is now a lot more empowered to be themselves. And the companies understand that. The companies value that instinct as well. And I think most importantly, we've reached a point where DEI is no longer an appendage. You know, it's not an afterthought. It's
yeah.
something that organizations are leading from. And I think it's high time that consciousness comes into play because if you don't have a happy workplace, there's no point doing anything that you do. Because, you know, then it starts showing in the attrition rates that you have. It starts showing in, you know, with people leaving, their productivity goes down and the level of dissatisfaction can be very, very high. So I think there could have been a time somewhere in the past where DEI was an afterthought, if I can mention it like that. But I think today DEI is the leading instrument or the leading inspiration behind putting an organization together. And I'm
Yeah.
very happy that the idea of equality and the idea of just being fair for being people who they are and providing help, letting people be themselves is uh, is an important conversation today. I
Yeah.
think it's a good time.
I mean, it would be right for me to ask you at this point is that what happens to an employer brand when DE&I is done badly? What does that actually cost the company? If you know of a moment or if you know of the story, don't need to name names, but if you know of something, it'd be great to hear where it's backfired.
Yeah, I feel actually, you know, it's not long before the impact starts showing. And see, word travels fast today. And if an employer extremely unhappy for whatever reason in the organization, and it's not even about somebody's opinion. It's just about fairness. I always say this. Somebody asked me the other day as well that do you think we can, you know, DI is only about revenue or employee retention and things like that. I always say this. I'm like, those are very, very happy benefits that we get out of DI. But at the same time, DI is just about the right thing and the right values and the principles of the organization. So if an organization is not upholding those values properly, I think it'll very soon start showing in the attrition. It'll very soon start showing in how the employees are talking about it. And before you know, I think a lot of people in the industry probably will understand that as well, right? And today we have so many platforms where these kind of conversations can be tracked. You have Glassdoor, you have so many of these areas where people try and see what the ratings of the company are. And I think it's a very good way of understanding and taking yourself seriously, taking your career very seriously. I think it's an informed way to do it. So I think I personally feel anything beyond revenue would be a small consideration for that matter. But I think what a company loses in terms of credibility is a much greater damage or is a much greater loss when something like this comes to fore.
It doesn't take too much time for the reputation to go kaput. I say that it probably can be done overnight. Like by the
Yes.
time you sleep and you wake up, there's a
Yes.
certain reel that has gone viral, and
Exactly.
you will never know why, what,
Exactly.
how, and it's
Yeah.
just. But how fast can it go downhill? What do you think? How long does it take to damage control, to kind of repair in your experience? While the reputation can go downhill in overnight, the repair is much longer. How much time do you think that?
To be very honest, fortunately, we've never really had that situation so far. Mostly, we've always had extremely happy employees, very, very good reviews. People are very happy to be part of Deloitte. I'm sure, it doesn't take a lot of time for the damage control teams to kick in as well. Somebody
Correct.
who's working for your reputation, somebody who's working for crisis management.
And usually it's the PR companies.
It's usually the
But the
PR coming,
reason
but
I ask this, and sorry to
yeah,
cut you, the reason I ask this is because it's a very common trait that I've noticed that, we'll see that jo hoga dekha jayega. When we cross that bridge when it comes through. But
yes,
nobody really talks about how long does it take to cross that bridge. And crossing that bridge also means losing money. Crossing that bridge also means reputation management. And all
absolutely.
that is the cost factor, which
Yes,
people don't realize at that point.
yes,
PR companies will do their job, but they have to work harder. And in some cases, will charge you a lot more because they have to
yes,
work harder. So
yes,
that
exactly.
revenue, that is going to affect your bottom line, which is
Yes,
why I
yes,
was asking that question. Surely one cannot put a time frame. I understand that. It could take 3 months, 6 months, and in some cases it could take a year. And look, I know that once it's online forever,
yes, yes.
right?
It's online
So
forever.
it's
Absolutely.
online forever. People might say that we've taken it down, but it's online forever.
Yes.
Anyway,
And I think it's a very expensive mistake to make, right?
it
Like you're
is.
mentioning, it's an expensive mistake to make on various grounds. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is why I like these conversations. And I hope if people are listening, they're probably understanding that prevention is better than cure. So you might as well be careful. You mentioned this a little while ago that, there is a lot of psychological safety, which is very important for DE&I. So, yes, how connected do you think is psychological safety to DE&I? And how does it actually show up in how people talk about their employer externally?
I think psychological safety is paramount. That's the word I will use. And I think psychological safety, even beyond D&I, Brian, is at the level of human experience and humanity, right? I always say this that we spend almost half of our lives at the workplace, right? Most of us spend 8 to 9 hours at work, sometimes during certain spell cycles, during certain considerations, sometimes more than that as well, 10, 11 hours at work, right? That's a very, very important chunk and a very, very significant chunk of your life that you're spending at the workplace. If you have to come to work and work there and you don't feel safe, you don't feel seen, you have to hide certain parts of yourself. I think it's a huge problem. And I think it's a place where it impacts the rest of your life as well, because a lot of people, they carry that feeling, they carry that dissatisfaction back into their personal lives, vice versa. It becomes an extremely vicious place to be in. So I think psychological safety and the safety to just be who you are, the safety to be able to communicate what you want to communicate, the safety to be able to express your dissatisfaction. If you disagree with something, the safety to disagree, and to know that, you know what, it's a place where you will be taken care of no matter what. I think it's a huge consideration because it impacts everything that you're doing at workplace. It boosts your productivity. You're happy to come to work. At the same time, you are much more likely to make meaningful conversations, meaningful relationships at work. And all of these things give birth to a culture and an ecosystem which is unshakable. I always say this. So we've personally been in a situation where we've tried upholding everything that we can from the psychological safety point of view. And there is something that we do in Deloitte, which is called the Leading with Heart. It's a campaign that we've done where different levels, senior levels of our Deloitte hierarchy, they get trained to always choose kindness first, always lead with heart a conversation, deal with the situation professionally, but at the same time, never lose touch with kindness. So
Correct.
leading with the heart has been a huge campaign for us, has been very, very successful for us. And psychological safety is a very important aspect of it. So we give a lot of importance to it. And I think it's a non-negotiable. If you cannot be who you are and if you cannot have good, positive mental health, and a sense of security at workplace, I personally think it's not worth it because I wouldn't want to work in a place like that either.
Can a company have strong psychological safety without a strong DE&I program, or does one always feed the other?
I think psychological safety and DEI are kind of connected with each other, right? You can't have one without the other. I'd like to believe that if you have psychological safety, you want to take care of people. There are many other aspects of taking care of people that you're also considering in your organization. So DEI naturally comes into play. And if you have DEI, you cannot have DEI without psychological safety because it doesn't make any sense,
Correct.
right? So I think they complete each other, they bounce off of each other. And no matter what, I think they need to exist to make sure that it's a healthy workplace for all.
I mean, there are companies who are genuinely the teams, the managers, the leaders, they're all very, very inclusive as humans. Some might say that this is how we are. We don't really need to have a DE&I program because we're very inclusive right from the minute we walk into the door to get out of the door, and continues in a lot of spaces and times as well. Because I know of companies that provide security and support to people working late at nights and then having to reach them, and so it doesn't just end at the door, it goes on
Mm.
even further,
Yes.
which is what I was saying, that they may not necessarily have an ERG, but they're just doing it because it's just naturally there for them. But correct, I agree. Couple of last questions. If you were advising an employer brand leader who's starting from scratch on DE&I, not the comms, the actual work,
Yes.
where do you tell them to begin?
I would tell them to begin by listening, be an active listener, actually keep their pulse on the ground and really understand what their workplace is all about, the kind of people who work for them, and really understand what people have to say. Because you cannot actually create a DI strategy or a DI framework, or you can't start helping people without understanding where they're hurting, right? It's very important to understand that. So I would say be an active listener, have discussions, have forums, have town halls, invite people to come and share themselves with you, and start from there. It's usually where somewhere or the other you will find an impetus which you need to consider for your DI programs, and a very good place to begin from. So I would say we start by listening.
So I'm glad you're saying that, because now let's also flip the coin and ask you, what's the most common starting mistake, regardless of the organization, that people make when they think of DE?
So I think what they do is they sometimes, adopt the DI techniques or DI frameworks, which may not be the most suitable for their geography or their company. I'm not saying this in a very loose way. I'm not saying that you cannot have an equality program. That's the most basic requirement of DI. I'm saying trying to understand the geography that you're in, trying to understand the demographic that you work for, trying to understand what percentage of the demographic is Gen Z, how many of them are millennials, what are their requirements as specific to your organization. I think those things are very important before you start adopting things that you see from a different organization. You have to make everything contextually relevant to you. That's very important. And I think that's a common mistake that people make, because a lot of times people are in a hurry to bring change. But I always like to say this: change is a sustainable, steady effort. You have to do a little bit of it every day for it to actually reach a point of fruition. But the most important thing is you do it with an intention of doing the right thing every day. You choose to do the right thing every day.
The change starts with yourself.
Absolutely. That is
Most
so true.
importantly, when people talk about DEI, I think we often miss the most important part, the and I. The I stands for inclusion. Yes, I understand that. But to me, and in my opinion, it also stands for the individual, because inclusion is created through policies, yes, but by
Yes.
people, by individuals who choose to accept, acknowledge, and welcome others without judgment. So, for the ones who are listening, the next time you say DEI, remember it's not just DEI, it's DE and I, because the and I is you.
Yes. Yes. That is so true. Thank you for the beautiful idea, Brian. I think I'll take that with me. Thank you.
Anyway, Ash, this was honestly such a good conversation. I think what stood out to me most is the amount of stuff that you are doing at Deloitte. I will take this conversation elsewhere, find out where do you get the energy and the creative mind to work on this. But you know what? Hats off to the Chief Happiness Officer, hats off to your CEO, hats off to Deloitte as an organization doing so much. To everyone listening, if this got you thinking about where your organization actually stands, not where it says it stands. That's the whole point of these conversations on the Let's Talk podcast. A quick word on what we do at Let's Talk. We are an employer branding and talent marketing agency working with companies across India and Australia Basically, we help organizations figure out what's actually true about their workplace and then help them tell that story in a way that's honest to the people already there and to the people they're trying to bring in. If any of what Arsh shared today is sitting with you, or you're wondering how it applies to your own organization, feel free to reach out to me or to anybody at Let's Talk. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Let's Talk podcast. Arsh, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the opportunity.